This is Voices for Climate, the podcast where activists, scientists, innovators, and everyday people speak out for the planet. If you're looking for honest conversations, bold ideas, and real climate solutions, you're in the right place. My name is Arnav, and today we're joined by Alex Harris. Alex is listed in the Forbes 30 Under 30 for social media, and as part of his work, he uses online storytelling to inspire audiences for environmental action. His content has educated over 890,000 followers and garnered over 100 million views. His work has helped shift political opinions and help pass federal and state policies that protect people, the planet, and our climate. Alex, it's an honor to have you here.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, so to start off, can you kind of share what first drew you to climate activism and more specifically why content creation kind of became your tool of choice?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I found out about climate activism broadly when I was in high school. So it was taking an environmental science class and learning about climate change, which I already knew existed, but developed more of an understanding then, and realized that I knew I wanted to give my life to a cause that mattered and was bigger than me. But any other cause, like any social cause that we could like give ourselves to, is kind of outranked by climate. If we don't address climate change, then the social injustices around the world get worse too. So being an outdoorsy, adventurous person, liking to tell stories, and seeing that made me want to get into the space. So I went to college, I got a degree in environmental studies and practiced photography outside of school and writing. That's how I started practicing the comms side of things. I got internships in pretty much anything that had to remotely do with environmental communication. I worked at like the local museum, I worked for Cliff Bar, things like that, as like a college ambassador. Um, and then when I graduated, I wound up not being able to get a job anywhere because I graduated during COVID and no one was hiring. So I knew that I still had this passion and that I really wanted to do it, but couldn't do it in the traditional way. And so I went on the road partially because I thought it would be interesting, captivating hook for people online, but also because I had to. I was literally out of options. So I got food stamps, moved into my car, and then was like, I'm gonna try this as best I can, and I'll keep going until the food stamps run out. If they do and it hasn't worked, then I'll get a job at a coffee shop or something wherever I end up and make it work from there. But it did end up working out, and as you very well summarized, has grown into a whole community online, which I'm really thankful for. So that's why I started social media, and since then I've just seen it as the best way to convert people to action for climate causes and environmental causes. So I continue to do it.
Yeah, that's a really inspiring story. And, for our audience who might not be as familiar with your work, can you dive a little deeper into kind of what content you create and kind of what your, day-to-day work looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. I make videos either for adventure or education purposes. So they're either like funny, they're always usually a little funny, but they're trying to teach people to care about nature and take action to protect it. And I think it's important for me to show myself caring about nature and taking action to protect it and leading by example. So I try to make videos that either include me going out and about adventuring through the world. When I lived in my car, that was very easy to do. Now it's like me showing hikes and stuff that I go on, or I just recently went to Iceland, and like featured a bunch of photos from that adventure. Um, so there's that side of it. There's the just love nature side of it. And some every year, for example, I'll make a video about the Perseids meteor shower and be like, hey, this is happening. You should go see it. It'll be beautiful. It's in August every year. It's happening this weekend. Grab a friend and go fall in love with the world around you a little bit more. So that's one side. The other side is all the educational advocacy stuff. And that usually starts a lot more in depth. I'll use like green screen style videos where I'm explaining things behind me and teaching people about particular causes, and kind of laying out an introductory explainer to something like the national park system and how it's been threatened this year. Or I just literally before hopping on this call put together a piece for the University of Michigan. We've got a series of videos coming out here soon talking about the research that they do with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. um, about the Great Lakes. So that's been very exciting and really fun. I've done stuff for Save the Boundary Waters. And really, I just look out for causes that I think people can resonate with well, and that have an action opportunity that viewers online can get involved with. And if those things are there, then I mean, everyone loves the outdoors. Everyone's very passionate about nature. So when they see the opportunity to help, um, we all help. And it's very exciting and inspiring to me to see sometimes millions of people get involved with these causes, and it's most inspiring to see them take the cause and run with it in their own way and make their own content and get their own community involved. Like, I love the fact that you're making this podcast. I love seeing any videos that people make about causes online. Like, that is the most inspiring thing to me, is seeing folks like you, and really anyone out in the world using the platform to get their community involved.
Yeah, no, I agree. That definitely is very, exciting, inspiring, and clearly, you're doing amazing work, especially with all the breadth of topics you cover. And, I guess in terms of, your background, both with, environmental studies, but also your various experience at the museum with the Cliff Bar, et cetera, are there any unique ways that, I guess your experiences have been shaped that you bring to content creation?
Oh man. Uh Hmm. Well, first, you're a very great listener. Like, thank you for keeping track of all this stuff. You're a fantastic interviewer. I think the thing that is like continues to be the most influential to me about content creation and the way that I do it and like really, really try to stay to, is largely because of the way that I've started and the way that I was raised and um like just my mindset broadly is that I genuinely believe that every single person's voice can completely change the world, and like have a really, really big impact. There are so many people in this space that have like taken what they have and worked with very little to be able to like become a driving voice in the conversation around their area or a particular cause. Um, and having started literally in my car, like in poverty, I was like, yeah, let's do this. I decided to go for it and it wound up working. And so I really do genuinely believe that anybody can make the difference that they want to make in the world. And so I try to continue to have that in my content. Like, I don't ever want to have my videos look too professional. If they are a more professional thing, like I made a documentary a little bit ago, um, and we tried to make a point to keep it as like down to earth as we possibly could. So that like down to earth side of things is really, really important to me. And hearing stories of people talking about how these issues matter and how like they appreciate people advocating for them. When I was advocating for mature and old growth forests last year, someone reached out to me and talked about how in the DMs they sent like a few paragraphs about how the local forest near their house is where they went to heal. It was a huge part of their healing journey for a very, very big injury that they had. And so he talked about how meaningful it was to him to have that space talked about and advocated for. And now that place is safe largely because of the work that we did together, like me and him and his community and everybody by advocating for those places. So that stuff keeps me going, and the tie to heart and the tie to individuality and personal identity I think is so important. And I just want to make sure that encouraging other people to stand in their identity is always part of the messaging that I put out.
Yeah, and that's very, very powerful. I definitely agree with what you said about how, anyone really can make a difference. You don't need to be in a very, special place with lots of resources. Anyone can achieve anything and make an impact. I think that is, very inspiring. And you mentioned previously as well how, your work has obviously reached a very, very large audience and has inspired action. Are there any, specific stories, I guess, besides the one you just mentioned about the forest with, people having been influenced by our work and then going on to create change in their communities?
Yeah, yeah, there's actually a story that I really like to tell about this called I call it the Rory story. There's a kid who's And, well, now I guess he's not really a kid anymore because this was like 6 years ago. But at the time that this happened, he was an elementary schooler in West Virginia. And this was during the first campaign that I worked on to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge up in Alaska from oil drilling, which worked and has now been reversed. And so there's a lot of effort to continue to combat that. But at the time, Rory was messaging me every day. He was like sending messages constantly, commenting on everything, liking everything. He was like popping up on every live stream. He was so involved. But he was 8, so I didn't talk to him as a stranger on the internet, like hundreds of miles away. I was just very touched by the fact that he was so involved. Um, and instead of taking that like lack of interaction and being like bummed out by it or like not really, letting it fizzle out his spirit, he turned instead to his own community and talked to his teacher and asked if they could make sending a public comment to protect the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge from oil drilling an extra credit assignment for the class. And the teacher, of course, thought that was very sweet and said, yes, we can absolutely do that. Go for it. So his class sent in a letter. And then the teacher went to the teacher's lounge and was like, wasn't this an amazing thing that my student did? And the other teachers were like, oh my gosh, yeah, like we should do that too. And so they made it extra credit for their classes as well. And presumably the kids all went home and brought it to their families, and many of their families participated as well. And so little Rory at hip height at 8 years old was wondering, like trying, like screaming into the void online, being like, how do I help with this? Not getting an answer, and then turning to his community, standing in his identity and moving people that, you and I could never move because we're not part of that rural community in West Virginia and we don't go to that elementary school. Um, so that particular story happened very early in my career, um, and has continued to stick with me. There's been example after example of that happening with different people and different identities all over the world, but it's especially touching with the little elementary school, because none of them live anywhere near that cause and they still manage to stand in their identity and rally for it.
Yeah, that's a very heartwarming story. I think it shows, not only the impact that, just one person can make to then create like a ripple effect, kind of throughout the community, but also, I guess, the power of social media, right? I mean, your work in Alaska impacted someone all the way in West Virginia, right? So I think it's very inspiring. It definitely also shows, the power of social media. And, kind of on the topic of social media, I guess, obviously, especially, in, today's, age, there's a lot of misinformation that goes around. People's attention spans are short. Social media is often focused on promoting like short form content that, appeals to people within the first 2 seconds, right? So how does your work, I guess, ensure that climate messaging is, accurate and reaches audiences without people, scrolling past it or something?
Yeah, I think that it's important to remember that people, um, even if an attention span is particularly short for a single video, every single video is a door into the topic. So if I'm first talking about an issue, I'll usually do a longer, as far as social media goes, like a 3-minute video, highlighting the main talking points of a topic. And there is more detail to it. And I like keep in mind that I'm going to address those details in future iterations of the topic. But that first main one that will probably reach the most general audience, it's like, okay, here's a bunch of reasons to care. I don't care which one you care about. I just want to validate the fact that you care too. Pick one, go for it, hop in if you like it, and take action. Once that happens, people are interested in continuing to learn about the topic. And so you can include other details and more nuance in video after video as you continue on. By the end of the week, say it's just a week, you've put out 7 videos that are all 1 to 3 minutes long. That's the same length as a 10 to 20 minute YouTube video on a topic that has that like deeper nuance. If it's an even longer campaign, like 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, and you put out a video almost every day, by the time people watch the campaign take place, they've seen a documentary on the topic. They just watched it in little chunks. And so I think about it that way where I'm like, I understand that the attention span thing is happening and it's like disappointing to me too, but it's something that also like we can work with and continue to educate nuanced through. I think we can fault if we try to fit all that nuance into a single piece because that just won't happen. I mean, you can't really fit all the nuance into even an hour and a half long documentary on something. But if you think of them as a collective and you understand that people will be watching more than one, then you can teach more people more things about more topics over multiple videos.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's definitely a smart strategy. I guess, splitting it across different videos, not trying to cram everything into one. I think that definitely, makes a lot of sense. And I guess, just kind of in your work, have there been any like misconceptions, I guess, about people in terms of like climate communication on social media that you've seen?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's still a like breakout industry, right? So there's like question about how legitimate it is. I have an environmental degree. Most of the fellow creators that I know that do this work have an environmental degree. But I think that the necessity of that for something to be considered legitimate, I would challenge because in the age that we're in, where we need everybody on board for climate. Um, People are not all going to resonate with someone that comes from that academic background. People are going to resonate with different identities. That's a big part of the reason why I think it's so important for people to be sharing their personal truth and their personal identity and their personal reason for caring when they talk about these issues. Um, it also ties into that like multiple video effect, right? If we have you, me, and eight other people talking about something, all saying different things, but the very excited viewer watching the trend, seeing all 10 of us talk, then they get an enormous amount of nuance through all of us together collectively.
Mhm.
Um, so I think the biggest misconception is that there's not that much effort or work or thought put into social media videos like this, often because they look rather amateurish. But they're amateurish on purpose. They're like amateurish to maintain relatability. And there's an enormous amount of strategy and thought that goes into it and a lot of academic background behind all of it. It just is, it's a baby industry. And so there's a lot of question as to how legitimate it is. But for climate and conservation and environmental causes broadly, environmental justice especially, um, I think that the passion legitimizes it. And the way that these communities and folks around the country and the world that we're all rallying for these things, like from the heart, um, gives it the legitimacy to evaporate those misconceptions. Like if that was the thing that maintained legitimacy, Rory's voice wouldn't matter, but it does. And is part of something that did change the world. Like the fact that they wrote in is actually what wound up leading to that policy being put in place. So I always challenge that misconception. I see that misconception. That's like definitely the one that I like feel the most around the space, but would challenge it because it does drive change.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you kind of mentioned about these, behind the scenes efforts. Can you elaborate more on, what that looks like, especially like the, the things that happen behind the scenes that people don't realize. You mentioned how there's a whole like creator community, right? Are there any insights from, I guess, meeting other people that do similar things as you that people just don't realize?
Totally, totally. I mean, a big part of the behind the scenes work, at least in my process, is like if there's an issue that I want to talk about or have been like asked to talk about, like sometimes people will send me emails from their community being like, "Hey, I've seen you work. Can you talk about what's going on here?" That's how I got involved with the Protect the Porkies campaign in Michigan. Someone reached out from the area. Um, and uh step one is talking to the people most affected by said issue and making sure I understand where they're coming from and where multiple people in their community are coming from and what they think is important to get across and why. I can do that now that I like have this platform and reputation. That wasn't always possible at the beginning, and I definitely would not use that as a reason to not talk about something, if you're passionate about talking about it. Um, I just always think it's important to ask why we're saying the things that we're saying, and largely the most inarguable reason to care is whatever sits in your heart. So I would always lead with that. But as far as behind the scenes goes now that I have the opportunity to talk to people, I try to do that. and make sure that I like understand where they're coming from, what they want. So that's one part of it. Amongst creators, it's, like a like-minded person and like someone who obviously has passion and heart is someone I'm very keen to talk to. And so we'll all reach out to each other often and see like, hey, did you hear about this? Like, do you plan on talking about it? If so, how? What are you saying? And so we'll like organize in that way to try to do that. And sometimes we will split up topics the way that we talked about earlier, where it's like, oh, you've got this side of things, I'll take this side of things, and then people will watch both. And so we can like teach people different things different ways. That's part of it. I've been really excited this year by the amount of cross-party line conversation that's been going on amongst creators. Um,
Mhm.
Everyone is trying to communicate with people that are all over the place in terms of like interest and background. We saw that with the public land sell-off. There were a lot of creators that I had never talked to before that were keen to get interested or get involved and interested in the topic. Um, and like do interesting work in, say, the hunting space or the fishing space, or the off-road space. And so we were all talking about like different things that we were approaching and ways we were doing it, and we're all very welcoming to each other, which was exciting. So I love that about the creator community. And it's increasingly happening behind the scenes with pretty much every campaign, which is fun and very, very grassroots, like genuinely grassroots, because it continues to embody that spirit of anyone can be part of this. If you want to be part of this, be part of it. And if you have a creator that you follow, um, and want to jump on the ship and like put out content of your own, try DMing them, or better yet, send an email. Emails are a really great way to reach creators because a ton of people send DMs, but almost no one sends emails.
Mhm.
And so if you want to participate in something, most people are pretty down to earth and down to like welcome people on board.
Yeah, that's, pretty cool to hear, especially the part you mentioned about how, creators kind of split up the work, I guess. I think that's really cool to hear how it's like a broader like movement and definitely creates, a very big impact, which is inspiring to hear. I wanted to, shift a little bit towards the policy side that you talked about before. Um, you know, Policymakers, I think, lately are kind of shifting towards social media, especially to, appeal to like a Gen Z audience. What lessons do you think that policymakers can take into the future in terms of like the climate storytelling that you and other creators are doing with climate change?
Yeah, I think that there's no denying the impact that social media has on topics and on votership. So if, say there's a caricature of a like very general idea of a politician who like only cares about votes. That's like usually not the case, but say that's like all they care about to like maintain power by securing votes. Um, Social media is the best way to get a lot of people to learn about a thing. It just is. And if you do it in this authentic way, which so many environmental causes are, like so many people care about them so genuinely, um, then putting it out there on such an authentic platform and having it resonate to so many people, which is something anybody can do, um, genuinely does impact like whether or not people win elections, which is wild to think about, but it's true. Um, and so I think that it's in most politicians' best interests, assuming they care about votership, to align with climate positive causes and environmentally positive causes, because increasingly the majority of Americans do care about those things, regardless of, what traditional media might try to put out. Like statistics show that most people are on the same page about this and we all deeply care. Um,
Mhm.
so that's the main thing is I would encourage politicians to look at the viewership of these topics, um, and then decide from there whether they want to be for or against the millions of people that care about this stuff.
Mhm. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And then I guess, the last thing I kind of wanted to talk about now is like kind of youth perspectives. So I guess, first off, many young people do feel overwhelmed by climate anxiety. And so, are there any advice that you kind of incorporate within your, your content to help turn that fear into maybe enabling action.
Absolutely, yeah. I've definitely been there too. Like I still cope with that. I actually, not specifically for climate anxiety broadly, but because this work can be pretty intense from time to time, and there's like so much to think about. I go to therapy on a weekly basis. And so that's something that I highly, highly encourage. It is so helpful to be able to talk through those things in a dedicated way, and I advocate for it pretty heavily. So that's like advice number one. It's like figuring out a way to sort that and like talk about or confront those emotions. Um, Out in nature, going to therapy. I play musical instruments. Some friends of mine do, those are all like rather peaceful activities. Other friends of mine like box, they climb. They like get like the aggression out in some way because that's how it manifests in them. I think figuring out a way to process that is important. And then on top of that, as far as like advice for confronting it goes and how I work it into my content, um, I don't often directly address the topic of climate anxiety um, beyond trying to maintain a confident tone and encourage people that they genuinely can make a difference. I think with climate change in the world, like it's something that we have to confront and something that is actively being confronted, community to community. And so I try to empower people to like get involved with making their particular community more resilient, especially as we like, have seen the failures of other generations who are filled with people that have been like deeply trying to solve this problem and very passionate, but land on our shoulders. We have this simultaneous game now of not just figuring out how to stop climate change from getting worse, but also mitigating its impacts. And I find a lot more uh, confidence when I'm working on both. And so finding a way to be involved with both of those things in some way, both like talking about causes that prevent, for me, that's talking about causes that keep climate change from getting worse while also being involved in mitigation efforts. So that's like helping make my own, I live in Colorado, like helping make my own community more resilient to things like wildfire and stuff like that. And admitting that problems are coming, but understanding that we have agency and an ability to be proactive to those things is how I like, it doesn't get rid of anxiety for me, don't get me wrong, but it does help me confront it and feel more stable
Right.
when like addressing that fear. Um, so in my content, I just try to give as many ways as possible to help other people have a role in those two things, like a tangible role in mitigating or reversing climate change.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And then I guess my last question for you then is there any advice you would give to especially young people who are looking to enter this field of content creation? Any skills you think are important for people to start building, or maybe something you wish you had known when you first started?
Absolutely. I think that you should not be afraid to do things differently. The movement broadly so far has been built on these traditional methods that have gotten us as far as we have, but are now changing amidst social media, like a faster paced set of technologies, a totally different generational culture. And so I know that starting off in a career, it can be it can feel like you're meant to impress and do the things that people have done, or of the people that have done, like gone before you. I think it's okay to look up to folks that have gone before you. I think it's important to talk to folks that have gone before you, but I think it's also very important that you do things differently than the folks that have gone before you. And that's actually a very exciting and positive thing to do. And there are many out there who will help you do things differently. Um, and I think those are the folks that you should try to seek mentorship from, alignment with, because the world needs a lot of shaken up right now, and like experimentation and improvisation. Those are the things that are gonna see us through to the end and other side of this effort. So, if you have an idea for how the world could be changed and it might not line up with the way that people have tried before, go for it and talk to as many people as you can that have gone before to so that they can help you.
Yeah, that's honestly, such amazing advice. I think such a powerful note to end on. So, Alex, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experiences and insights. I greatly appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Arnav. And thank you to everyone that was listening. This was an absolute blast, and I'm glad that we're all in the fight together.
Yeah. So that's all we have today on Voices for Climate. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow the show and share it with someone who cares about building a more sustainable future. And I'll see you all next time. Thank you.